First Lady Melania Trump made a rare and rather unexpected public statement. She spoke out about what she says are false claims about her and notorious sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Let's bring in Scripps News Group senior congressional correspondent Nathaniel Reed this morning to talk about this. Hey, good morning, Nate. Good to see you. So how does the First Lady's comments last night tie into the ongoing congressional investigation? And could this lead to the public finally learning the names of people on that Epstein list?
Hey, good morning, Michelle. Great to see you as well. Look, there's a lot more questions than answers coming out of that statement. That surprise statement, by the way, from the First Lady of the United States to a room of surprised reporters at the White House. Questions about whether this could lead to testimony from some of the accusers of Jeffrey Epstein and whether we could finally learn the names of some of those co-conspirators, which up to this point have remained behind closed doors. There was a hope that the Epstein Files Transparency Act, that bill that passed nearly unanimously through Congress, would release some of those names publicly. Ultimately, the women...
Jack Mockler. Here, sit down. Before I tell you this, a rare and revealing moment has emerged between the President and First Lady, exposing dynamics that no communications team could have anticipated. It marks one of the most unusual political dynamics of Trump's second term. On April 8th and 9th, Melania Trump appeared at the White House and delivered a formal statement that was later posted on the official White House website. In that statement, she declared that the lies linking her with the disgraceful Jeffrey Epstein need to end today. She insisted she has never been friends with Epstein, never had a relationship with him or Ghislaine Maxwell, never flew on his plane, never visited his island. But then she went much further than a simple personal denial. Melania called on Congress to hold a public hearing centered on Epstein survivors with sworn testimony entered into the congressional record. Epstein was not alone, she said.
Who have accused Jeffrey Epstein, coming out with a joint statement, 16 of them in the hours after Melania Trump made that statement yesterday, saying in part, quote, First Lady Melania Trump is now shifting the burden onto survivors under politicized conditions that protect those in power. Again, the First Lady making that surprise statement from the White House, calling on Congress to hold public hearings. Take a listen.
I call on Congress to provide the women who have been victimized by Epstein with a public hearing specifically centered around the survivors. Give these victims their opportunity to testify under oath in front of Congress with the power of sworn testimony.
And again, major questions about whether that really could happen. The top Democrat on the House Oversight Committee, which has been investigating Jeffrey Epstein, endorsing that call from the First Lady, saying he's willing to hold that hearing. There's a hope that if these women are under oath, they can then say the names of some of these men.
Victims must have their day before lawmakers. This is a sitting First Lady calling for congressional Epstein hearings with survivor testimony in a formal White House statement. And this is happening at a moment when her husband's administration has been managing the Epstein file situation for months, when Bondi, Blanche, and the Congressional Oversight Committee are all actively involved in exactly the kind of accountability process Melania is publicly calling for. The timing and the content of this statement are extraordinary. The administration she is part of has been trying to manage the Epstein narrative in ways that would minimize political damage and control the conversation. The congressional investigation into the Epstein files has been ongoing, and the administration has been resisting the kind of expansive accountability process that advocates and Democrats have been demanding.
Without the possibility of any lawsuits against them for braising these names. This is one of the areas that have been under consideration, the question of whether they could do this on Capitol Hill. There's concerns about lawsuits from some of the possible co-conspirators, accusations of libel against these women. The top Republican, though, the chairman of the House Oversight Committee and House Speaker Mike Johnson have not yet weighed in on this request. Certainly, this could make things more complicated for them on Capitol Hill with an issue that Republican leadership has often sought to swat away. Questions about where things go from here, Michelle. Still, so much is unclear after that surprise statement from the First Lady yesterday.
Yeah, we'll just have to wait and see. But thank you so much, Nate, for all the context. We always appreciate it. Have a great weekend.
Thanks, Michelle.
Then the First Lady, from the official White House website, calls for more congressional hearings on Epstein with survivor testimony. That is not the direction the White House political operation wanted the Epstein conversation to go. It is the direction that congressional Democrats and advocacy organizations have been pushing, and Melania just added her voice from the most official platform possible to that push. The question of whether Trump knew about the statement in advance produced immediate political chaos in the days following. A host on a news program reported that Trump told them he did not know anything about his wife's statement before it aired. That is a specific and notable claim.
Here we go again.
A first lady first tonight.
So here it is.
Melania Trump's new documentary premiering at the Kennedy Center, which her husband is trying to rename, for the typically lower profile first lady, a moment that's anything but.
I'm a very private person and I'm a very selective person. What I do, what I don't do, when I talk, when I don't talk.
Mrs. Trump said to be deeply involved in what appears to be a careful, curated chronicling of the days leading up to her husband's second inauguration. With early word, she'd be making $28 million for the film, with its high-profile launch and high-powered backers. President Trump hosting a glitzy White House screening, and Amazon, led by Jeff Bezos, which acquired the doc and a related series for $40 million after the president's re-election, set to roll it out on 1,500 screens.
A sitting president publicly distancing himself from a formal statement issued through official White House communications channels by his own wife is not something that happens in normal administrations. If the statement had been unauthorized, if Melania genuinely acted without Trump's knowledge in issuing a formal statement from the White House website calling for Epstein congressional hearings, that would be an extraordinary breach of administration communications protocol and would represent a genuinely unilateral action by the First Lady that contradicted the administration's desired Epstein narrative management. But then an unnamed aide for the First Lady told the New York Times that Trump was aware of her plan.
With a $35 million marketing push, 10 times what's been spent on other high-profile docs, with custom popcorn buckets, ads on the Vegas Sphere, and during NFL playoffs.
Amazon is doing this for two reasons. One, they want to curry favor with the administration. And two, they want to get your attention.
Amazon has said it licensed the doc for one reason and one reason only, because we think customers are going to love it. Already, backlash before the first frame has dropped. Posters vandalized in L.A., theater screenshots online, fueling speculation the film could flop. Its director? Controversial. Brett Ratner, sidelined for years by allegations of sexual misconduct, which he denies. Still, analysts say the movie could be on track to make $5 million opening weekend. For Melania Trump, maybe a marquee moment. Hallie Jackson, NBC News, Washington.
Creating an odd public split between his claim of ignorance and her office's insistence he was not blindsided. The BBC and Guardian coverage noted that Melania's move prompted bafflement inside Washington, with reporters asking why she chose to speak and whether the president had approved it. The split between Trump's public claim of ignorance and her office's insistence he was not blindsided is itself a political fact that adds to the complexity. Either Trump's White House is issuing formal statements he claims not to know about, or he was aware and is publicly distancing himself from the statement's content for political reasons. Neither option is a particularly comfortable one for an administration trying to manage the Epstein narrative. The content of the Epstein statement connects directly to the broader Epstein accountability story in ways that make it politically more charged than a simple personal denial. Melania said Epstein was not alone, implicitly acknowledging that there are others whose connections to Epstein should be examined. And she specifically called for a hearing where survivors could testify with sworn testimony entered into the congressional record. That specific demand, sworn testimony in the congressional record, is the most powerful form of congressional accountability because it creates a permanent, legally significant record that cannot simply be managed away through press releases or administration talking points. Melania's call for that specific format on the official White House website adds institutional legitimacy to the demand that congressional Democrats have been making for exactly the same thing. The administration's Epstein narrative strategy has been to characterize the file releases as transparency, the Maxwell interview as a legitimate investigative step, and the ongoing inquiries as politically motivated harassment. Melania's call for congressional hearings with survivor sworn testimony cuts against every element of that strategy because it uses the platform of the White House itself to endorse the kind of accountability process the administration has been resisting. When congressional Democrats call for Epstein survivor hearings with sworn testimony in the congressional record, that is predictable partisan opposition that the administration can characterize as politically motivated. When watchdog organizations make the same demand, the administration can characterize it as advocacy group posturing. When the First Lady makes the same demand from the official White House website in a statement that Trump publicly claimed he did not know about before it aired, it is on the White House website. The administration cannot characterize its own website as a source of politically motivated harassment. The demand carries the institutional legitimacy of the White House platform, and every Democratic member of Congress who wants to press for Epstein hearings now has a White House statement as the citation for why those hearings are appropriate. Melania calling for Epstein congressional hearings from the White House website is the specific and politically significant outcome of a move that no communications team would have designed on purpose, which is probably why Trump said he did not know anything about it. This is the picture of a First Lady who is operating with a degree of independence from her husband's political interests that is genuinely unusual in modern American political history. In a 2025 interview covered by People magazine, Melania said she would be an independent First Lady and added that she is standing on her own 2 feet, that she has her own thoughts, her own yes and no, and that she does not always agree with what her husband is saying or doing, and that is okay. That statement of independence, combined with a surprise Epstein statement that Trump publicly claimed he did not know about, combined with the broader pattern of independent moves we have seen throughout the second term, paints a picture of a First Lady who is genuinely pursuing her own agenda alongside rather than simply in support of her husband's. The Guardian and BBC coverage characterized her as unusually willing compared to past First Ladies to talk about not always agreeing with her husband and to take on sensitive topics in her own voice. That characterization is consistent with the pattern of behavior. The surprise Epstein statement that Trump claimed he did not know about, the independence framing in interviews, the willingness to publicly distance herself from her husband's positions, all of it suggests a First Lady who is operating with genuine autonomy rather than simply following the script that the political operation would prefer. The documentary is the second major piece of this story, and it tells a different but related narrative about Melania's relationship to the Trump political operation and the financial dynamics at play. CNN reported that the film follows the days around Trump's return to the White House and is meant to show what it is like to transition from private citizen back to First Lady. The New York Times reported that Amazon paid approximately $40 million for distribution rights and committed another $35 million for marketing, a total of $75 million for a First Lady-centric documentary. The BBC noted that critics were saying the spending was partly about currying favor with Trump, suggesting that Amazon's extraordinary investment in a documentary about the First Lady was influenced by corporate calculation about the value of a positive relationship with the Trump administration. That financial context is significant on its own. The Amazon money represents the monetization of the White House platform in ways that raise the same kinds of questions we have covered in other stories about the blurring of lines between public role and private enrichment. The First Lady's office is a platform of the executive branch. When that platform is used to produce content that Amazon pays $75 million to distribute and market, the line between public role and private enrichment is at minimum blurry. The premiere at the Trump Kennedy Center, the venue bearing Trump's name after the renaming we have covered previously, adds another layer to the brand picture. The event featured heavy Melania branding, a black carpet walk, and attendance from senior White House and GOP officials. Rolling Stone and other outlets noted that the premiere effectively turned a personal branding project into a semi-official, state-adjacent event. The Melania documentary is simultaneously a personal commercial project generating significant private income, a political communications product shaping the First Lady's public image, an event hosted at a venue renamed in her husband's honor, attended by government officials, treated in press coverage as a White House event. Those overlapping categories, personal, commercial, political communications, government-adjacent official event, are the same categories that produce accountability questions about the blurring of lines between the Trump family's personal brand and the official institutions of the U.S. government. The pattern of blurring the line between private enrichment and public office is the through line that connects all of these stories, and the Melania documentary is the most visible and commercially successful example of that pattern in action. What makes this particularly significant is the contrast between the documentary's success and the administration's other cultural projects. Trump has always cast himself as the star of his family, of his business empire, of his political brand. Having the First Lady front a $75 million documentary with her name on the banners at a venue effectively renamed in his honor is a specific kind of brand dynamic that produces subtle tension. Two overlapping brands, one household, but the Melania documentary is currently generating more favorable coverage and more commercial success than the other signature moments the administration is trying to use for its cultural celebration. The documentary is simultaneously generating questions about whether Amazon's extraordinary payment reflects commercial calculation or corporate favor-seeking. The BBC specifically noted that critics were saying the spending was partly about currying favor with Trump. That means Amazon's calculation about how much to pay for and market a Melania documentary was influenced by Amazon's assessment of the corporate value of being seen as supportive of the Trump administration, which means the First Lady's platform is generating commercial income that is at least partly a function of her husband's political power rather than purely of her personal commercial appeal. First family members generating commercial income that reflects their proximity to the presidency rather than purely their independent commercial value is the same dynamic that produces the conflict of interest concerns about the family's crypto ventures, the UAE investment situations, and the other financial arrangements we have covered throughout this series. The questions that arise from this situation are serious and unavoidable. Is it appropriate for the First Lady's office to be used as a platform for commercial projects that generate private income? Does the fact that Amazon paid $75 million for distribution and marketing of a Melania documentary reflect commercial calculation or corporate favor-seeking? What does it mean when a documentary about the First Lady receives more favorable coverage and commercial success than the administration's official cultural projects? These are not hypothetical questions. They are the kinds of accountability questions that the administration has been trying to avoid answering, and the Melania documentary makes them impossible to ignore. The specific combination of a surprise Epstein statement that Trump publicly distanced himself from and a First Lady documentary that is outbranding his own celebration apparatus creates an administration narrative that is harder to manage, not easier, because of Melania's independence. Whether that independence serves Trump's political interests, whether having a First Lady who publicly says she does not always agree with her husband and occasionally issues surprise statements calling for Epstein hearings helps or hurts the political operation is a question whose answer appears to be complicated at best. On the Epstein statement, her team would argue that she is entitled to defend herself against false rumors that have been circulating about her for years, that the statement was a personal declaration rather than a political act, and that calling for victim hearings reflects genuine concern for justice rather than calculated political disruption of the administration's Epstein narrative. On the documentary, they would argue that Amazon's investment reflects the commercial value of a documentary about a compelling figure at a historic moment rather than purely corporate favor currying, and that Melania's right to pursue her own media and commercial projects independent of her husband's political agenda is a legitimate expression of the very independence she has claimed. These are real arguments. The right of a public figure to defend herself against false rumors is genuine. The right to pursue independent commercial projects is legitimate. Characterizing every move Melania makes as calculated political disruption of the administration imposes a conspiratorial coherence on what may simply be a complex person making decisions that serve her own interests and values without fully coordinating with the White House political operation. But here is what those arguments run into when you apply them to the specific political reality of the situation. The Epstein statement from the official White House website calling for congressional hearings with survivor sworn testimony is on the record regardless of Melania's intent. Every congressional Democrat who wants Epstein hearings can now cite it. The Amazon documentary's commercial terms, $40 million for distribution, $35 million for marketing, are unusually large for a First Lady documentary, and reflect calculations that include but go beyond pure commercial assessment. The Trump claim of ignorance followed by an aide saying he knew is itself a documented political complication that adds to the Epstein narrative rather than resolving it. Whether or not any of these moves were calculated to create political complications for Trump, they have. And the specific combination of a surprise Epstein statement he publicly distanced himself from and a First Lady documentary that is outbranding his own celebration apparatus creates an administration narrative that is harder to manage, not easier, because of Melania's independence. Melania Trump delivered a surprise formal statement from the White House calling for congressional Epstein hearings with survivor sworn testimony, and Trump publicly claimed he did not know about it in advance, while her aide said he did. She simultaneously advanced a documentary for which Amazon paid $75 million total, and that premiered at the Trump Kennedy Center with heavy Melania branding and senior White House attendance. She has publicly described herself as an independent First Lady who does not always agree with her husband. Her Epstein statement directly contradicts the administration's desired narrative of moving past the Epstein story by adding the institutional weight of the White House website to the call for more accountability. Her documentary is commercially outperforming the administration's other cultural projects. And the combination of the two moves, one pulling the Epstein spotlight back, one building the Melania brand at the administration's institutional expense, is what makes this situation so politically unusual and so significant. Not that Melania did something illegal or constitutionally extraordinary, but that she did something genuinely unusual for a modern First Lady, used the White House platform on her own terms, in ways that created political complications for her husband while building her own commercial and public profile in ways that may outlast his political moment. The pattern of moves we have been seeing throughout the second term, from the hand-waving photos to the independence interviews to the surprise statements, suggests that this is an ongoing story rather than an isolated chapter. The question of how Melania's independent voice and independent commercial interests interact with Trump's political needs during the most politically pressured period of his second term is a question whose answer we are going to see play out in real time. The hand-waving photos we covered earlier in this series, where Melania appeared to physically distance herself from Trump in public settings, were dismissed by some as trivial or meaningless. But when you place them in the context of her own statements about independence, her surprise Epstein statement, and her documentary project, they take on new meaning. They become part of a pattern of behavior that suggests a First Lady who is not simply a supporting figure in her husband's political operation, but someone with her own agenda, her own priorities, and her own willingness to act independently, even when that independence creates complications for the administration. The split between Trump's claim of ignorance and her office's insistence he was not blindsided is particularly telling. It suggests either that Trump is willing to publicly distance himself from his own wife's statements for political reasons, or that her office is willing to publicly contradict the president's claims. Neither interpretation reflects a fully unified administration. The Amazon deal raises questions about the monetization of the White House platform that the administration has not adequately addressed. When the First Lady's office is used to produce content that generates $75 million in commercial revenue, the line between public service and private enrichment becomes blurred in ways that create legitimate accountability concerns. And the fact that the documentary premiered at a venue bearing Trump's name, with senior White House officials in attendance, makes it harder to maintain the distinction between personal commercial projects and official government functions. The BBC's framing of the Amazon investment as partly about currying favor with Trump is particularly significant because it suggests that the commercial value of the documentary is not purely a function of audience interest in Melania's story, but also reflects corporate calculation about the value of a positive relationship with the administration. That dynamic, first family members generating commercial income that reflects their proximity to presidential power, is the same dynamic that has produced accountability concerns throughout the Trump presidency. What happens next is uncertain. More surprise statements could follow. More independent moves could emerge. The documentary could generate further controversy, or it could fade from public attention. But the pattern is clear. Melania Trump is operating with a degree of independence from her husband's political interests that is genuinely unusual for a modern First Lady. And that independence is producing real political complications for the administration at one of the most politically pressured moments of Trump's second term. The First Lady's statement calling for Epstein hearings with survivor sworn testimony is on the official White House website. The Amazon documentary deal is a matter of public record. The split between Trump's claim of ignorance and her office's insistence he knew is documented in multiple news outlets. These are not rumors or allegations. These are established facts that tell a story of a First Lady who is willing to act independently, even when that independence creates problems for her husband's political operation. Whether that independence ultimately serves Trump's interests or undermines them remains to be seen. But the question of how Melania's independent voice and independent commercial interests interact with Trump's political needs is one that will continue to play out in real time. And you are going to want to be here for every development as it unfolds. The pattern is clear, the questions are serious, and the political implications are significant. Melania Trump is not simply a supporting figure in her husband's political operation. She is a First Lady with her own agenda, her own priorities, and her own willingness to act independently, even when that independence creates complications for the administration she is part of.